The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
On today's Farm Connections, we visit interesting places near and far. First stop, Switzerland, as we meet with University of Minnesota students who discuss their recent study trip that focused on alpine farming. Then we travel to Houston County, Minnesota, where local farmers dress up their farms with colorful and meaningful barn quilts. We also meet the next FFA Student Leader of the Week, all right now on Farm Connections. One of the focal points of Farm Connections is agricultural education. We're eager to look at farming practices and philosophies from around the world to help us see our own ag operations in a new light. Today we're excited to connect with a group of students from the University of Minnesota who traveled to Switzerland to better understand alpine farming. What kinds of crops and livestock are grown in high altitudes? What traditions are upheld? And what new cutting-edge techniques are employed? Let's listen in. Julie, you took these fine young ladies and some others to Switzerland. Why?
Well, that's a very good question. This was actually our 4th year doing this, and at the University of Minnesota we really are trying to get our students to travel abroad, even if it's for 2 weeks like this trip was. And we were approached 5 years ago to be a part of this trip, and I jumped at the chance being an exchange student in Switzerland in the mid-1990s, and I thought this would be a great experience. And Switzerland is a good jumping off place for international travel. It's a foreign country, but it's not too terribly different. So we go there and study alpine agriculture, about what it's like farming in the mountains, what it's like living in the mountains, how the families are different, the government is different, and so it's turned out to be a great experience for our students.
Excellent, thanks. Chelsea, what did you find when you got there?
Well, as soon as we stepped off the plane, we could obviously tell that we were in a German-speaking country, and immediately we all just started trying to figure out what everything meant. We had received a sheet beforehand giving us a few different German phrases to know and use while we were in Switzerland, and we definitely put those to good use. And as soon as we got into the trip, it was just wonderful to experience the agriculture. We spent the first few days at the agricultural college in the town of Landcourt, and after that traveled to a host family stay where we went in pairs or singles and got to stay on a real Swiss farm for 3 days before traveling to a different region of Switzerland for the second week.
Fabulous experience, thank you. Meg, you got off that plane, what did you experience?
First, I was really excited because I love Europe. I went there once before, and I was so excited to go to Switzerland. And I have a dairy science major, so since it was a dairy-based trip, I was super excited to get started and see everything. And just seeing the mountains for the first time ever, and making them be the Swiss mountains that I saw, the Alps and stuff, that was really cool. And just being in a different country and how beautiful it was just an exhilarating feeling.
Well, with mountains and all the kinds of things that happen in valleys and different elevations, did you see different agriculture at each level, or was it all the same?
Obviously, the valley is going to be a lot more fertile land and a little bit more room for having fields. And as you work up the Alp, in the summertime, the cows will go up to the Alp and graze for the summer. And when you get to the very, very high elevations, there isn't necessarily a lot of room for having agriculture, and so it's a lot different in the United States where we have 100-acre fields that we can harvest our corn in. They're farming in very small areas on the mountainside at very steep slopes.
Meg, was the machinery the same as what you're used to on your farm?
No, not at all. They have very small machines and they're very wide, so they can maneuver on the mountains. But a lot of the time, they cut things by hand and then rake it down the mountainside. But where it's not as steep, they'll try and use the tractors to the best of their ability to try and gather the hay and stuff that they use. Because they usually use mostly fresh greens. They don't really feed corn like we do here in the U.S. They do lots of fresh forages and stuff. That's what they feed their cattle over there.
What's the average size of the dairy herd? Any idea?
Well, I'd say probably about 50 or smaller. They're very small, family-based farms. I live on a small 38-cow dairy here in Minnesota, so that's considered more of a larger farm over there in Switzerland. So my farm here in Minnesota is like a large farm there in Switzerland, which I thought was really interesting because to me a large farm is like 150 or like, you know, those big 1,000-cow dairies that are in some places. So I'm like, oh my gosh, my farm's like big. So it was an interesting thing to find out that like I would be very sustainable there than I am more here in Minnesota. So that was really interesting to learn. One of the farms we visited, which was actually owned by 4 farmers and then went down to 3 because one of the farmers retired, they actually had about 120 cows, so they were a very large farm for Switzerland. And they actually had like portable parlors at their farm, so then that's how they would like sustain themselves up in the mountains, so then they could have the cows be milked in the summer. So then the portable parlors would like follow the cows throughout the Alps where they went and grazed and stuff like that.
Would the milking parlors migrate back down the mountain in the winter?
Yes, yep, they're only up there in the summer, and then they had a barn where they actually milk the cows and keep them in the winter months.
Chelsea, how about fruits? You mentioned vineyards. Can you help us learn more about that?
Well, fruits and vegetables are a very widely grown crop in Switzerland. We had the opportunity to visit a very large berry farm and going to, they grew strawberries, raspberries, and plums there, and provided, I think it was close to 20% of the strawberries for Switzerland. So very large farm, fruit farm in Switzerland. And at the end of our tour, they gave us just these large bowls of strawberries with whipped cream on top, and it was very, very good. And wine is also a very important part of their culture there too. The valleys provide a good climate for growing grapes, and in the town that my host family lived in, it was actually a town of only 600 people, and there's over 30 wineries in that one town.
Interesting. Earlier you showed pictures of an ag business that sold like hand size and hand tools. Was that common to have the hand tool usage, or that was a bit of a novelty?
I mean, their machinery and equipment is very different. They do use a lot of hand tools, manual labor, because I mean, it's hard to get a large tractor up a mountainside. It needs to be wider, lower to the ground, so that you're not going to be flipping your tractor down the hill. But, and also manual labor is a big thing too. They hire their workers and train their workers very well to help them on the farm. And one interesting thing is that if you're going to own a farm in Switzerland, you actually have to have a degree in agriculture from a college. So not only are they very in tune to everything going on around them, but they're very educated about their farms as well.
Were you able to see any of the educational facilities, churches, monuments, those types of things?
Well, when we were with our host families, we were taken out around town and seeing some of the local things that they like to go and see. But one thing that I thought was really interesting was getting the opportunity to tour the Plantenhof College. They have a lot of world-class research there as far as their dairy program goes, and also getting to go in the swine barn and look at how hog production happens in Switzerland, because that was one thing that we didn't get to actually do, is go to a hog farm. So that being a little bit of my background and learning that farrowing crates are actually outlawed by the government in Switzerland, and just talking with some of the researchers at the college and learning that because of that they have to keep the sows and the litters in a freestall pen, which can lead up to a 20% mortality rate, whereas that might be around 5 or 10 if here in the United States, and getting to talk with them about their feelings about that and just how hog production in Switzerland is much different than here in the United States.
Sounds like a difficult trade-off to make. They've got 20% mortality versus much lower because of how they use their equipment or how they house the swine. Do they use deep bedding?
Yes, everything was in deeply bedded straws, free stalls, and then all the animals also have access to an outdoor pen as well.
Meg, anything about dairy facilities and handling that you noted?
They're very clean, very, very clean, and all their milk houses have to be tiled there. That's a rule that they have, is that everything has to be tiled in the milk house. They're very clean. They wash everything out every single day, twice a day. and how happy the cows actually seem. Like, everybody think that seems really silly, you know, saying that like happy cows, you know, whatever. But I mean, the cows, you know, they could tell they were comfortable, they had good bedding, they had great food to eat and everything, and you could just tell that they were just in a good environment that they wanted to be in.
And the breeds of dairy that you saw?
Brown Swiss, lots and lots of Brown Swiss. The farm that I stayed at, they had Holsteins, which a lot of people in the region that we were in weren't very happy about that, because Brown Swiss is like the Holstein to us here in America. So Brown Swiss is like the holy breed of cows there. But there was a few Holsteins on a couple of the farms. The one farm that we went to where we went out to the pasture, they had New Zealand Holsteins, were they?
I think so.
So they were smaller, so they weren't like the big Holsteins we have here, but mainly you saw Brown Swiss cattle around.
The big Holsteins don't do well in the mountains. Their feet and legs just are not made. You need a big brood cow, like a Brown Swiss, or where my host family's from, outside of Zurich, they have Simmental. And you wouldn't typically milk Simmental cattle, but there they do. They actually milk quite a bit because they have a nice high protein and fat content. So for that good cheese and butter and yogurt, the Simmental cattle are great, and they're built for the mountains as well.
Excellent. And you brought a bell?
Yes, this was on one of the last days we were actually in Switzerland. We went and visited a gentleman who handcrafts the bells, collars, and such like this. Like this is obviously a smaller bell, but some of the bells they make, they're like this big, and the collars are about this thick. And he sits there and he hand stitches all of these on there. And he's been doing it for years. They do it every year, so the cows are decorated with these belts and the bells, and they have flowers all over them, and that's what they do when they come down from the mountains in the fall, and they have a huge celebration in all the towns. And for me, like going to Switzerland, like this was one of the souvenirs I really wanted, because I thought they were really pretty, and it's something that this man does for a living, and he handcrafts these belts and stuff, and I just think that's like the coolest thing ever, because you could tell on some of them the stitching, like it must take him hours upon hours to do it, and they're just beautiful works of art.
Meg, didn't it start as a very functional thing to have a bell on a cow and then moved more towards ceremonial? I mean,
they actually still mostly all wear bells, but it's only mainly in the summer when they go up to the Alps. So then the people that are working up there for the farmers, when they want to bring them to a barn for milking, or if they're trying to find them to make sure they're all there, the bell helps them find them, because usually up in the mountains it's very foggy and the clouds are hanging low. So with having the bells, it helps them find the cows, and it also makes the cows feel safer, because the noise keeps away predators and stuff like that. So a lot of people are afraid that the bells are damaging the cows' hearing, but it's actually making the cows more happy and content, because they don't have to worry about predators, because the sound of their bells scares them away.
And I know you're wanting us to hear that noise, and it's a quality sound. Wasn't that fun? Thank you. What happens when you've got a whole herd doing that?
Lots of jingling. Where we stayed in Landcourt at Planthoff College, there was actually a pen of calves right outside our windows that had them. So we would hear jingling morning, noon, and night when we were there. So some people got a little irritated with it constantly ringing, but I mean, it's only the time you'll ever hear constant bells around a cow's neck, so it was kind of cool.
Did the experience change how you approach your day-to-day life in Minnesota?
I think that when students come back, what they don't realize, because I know when I traveled abroad, what I didn't realize was that it opens up your worldview, and that's not something necessarily tangible that you can take away and say, I did this, this, and this, but I would like to think that the students who do travel abroad learn to be a little more tolerant and open-minded of other viewpoints and of other cultures, and they know what it's like to not be able to speak a language. They know what it's like to be completely immersed in something and have to trust that everything's going to be okay, and trust myself, trust our coordinators. And so I think you don't realize it right away, but I think in the future that they'll realize that they really have more of a world view and represented America well, and are able to talk about issues, American issues, with other people without getting upset maybe, or being more open-minded.
Well, as an educator, that has to be gratifying, and also what a service to our students and Minnesota.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that, Julie.
Welcome.
And thanks for sharing today. It was
Thank
excellent.
you very much. Thanks for having us.
Chelsea.
Thank you.
Meg, thank you. It's hard to improve upon the beauty of our rich farmland, but some farmers in Houston County have found a way. They've installed barn quilts, unique designs that tell a story all on their own. The crew from our Arts and Heritage program, Off 90, put together this special feature on barn quilts.
Quilts tell a story, and this is just another way to tell a story.
I just love the bold colors of it. I love the pattern and how it changes when you look at it. It depends on where you put your eye. It changes all the time. We live really in God's country down here, I think, and it's such a beautiful spot. We have so many neat things to offer people when they come to Houston County.
Minnesota's losing about 1,400 barns a year, so our goal is to help people take pride in the barns that they have and to leave them up and maybe put a piece of artwork on them also. My name is Ann Salmis, and my parents, Harold and Dorothy Hendel, had the first barn quilt in Houston County, west of Caldonia. They had seen the barn quilts in Iowa and thought it would be a neat idea to do here in Houston County. We started out with 5. By fair time we had 16, but throughout the time people were putting quilts up. Right now in 2010 we have 44 quilts up, and our goal is to have 50 in the county by the end of the year. The project just really grew quickly, and I think people are really taking pride in their barns, in our rural heritage. People stop and they pull into our driveway and they're just really excited about seeing the quilts and thought it was a great idea. We now have a tour with hopefully 50 quilts by the end of the year, and the tour route is set up throughout Houston County. You can wind through some beautiful back roads, see different streams. We have some really neat natural resources in the area. We're trying to get people to stay in the local B&Bs, in the local state park, to use the facilities in Caledonia and surrounding communities.
The initiative's called Quilting the Countryside. A lot of groups came together to help us. The Sentence to Serve group helped prime boards. The school industrial arts class helped prime the boards for it. Community volunteers helped paint quilts for our auctions and for our initial quilts to get those up. You know, Senator Sharon Ropes played a lead role as well in helping us promote this by designating us as the heart of quilt country.
God's given us years of happiness here, now we must part. And as the angels come and call for you, the pains of grief tug at my heart. Oh, my darling, my heart breaks as you take your long
Well, I think it's important because we're preserving our history by preserving our barns. There's a lot of history in southeast Minnesota. It's one of the first areas of the state to be settled. The barns have a lot of history and tradition. That was the way that they put food on the table 50, 100 years ago. And, you know, it's just a real craftsmanship that put up that barn. And they're of all sizes. There's some round barns, there's square barns, there's barns that have been added onto. And the barns are starting to get to the point of deteriorating, whether do you fix them up or do you tear them down. And by putting a barn quilt on them, there's a lot of pride has come back in these old barns, and it's not only seeing the quilts, but to be able to see these barns.
This farm will be 100 years old in 2016. So we're just about a century-old farm. And the barn was built in 1916 by my wife's grandfather, which was Herman Dearson. They started the construction in the fall of 1916 and finished it in 1917. And the reason for the lean on the barn is because during that spring of 1917, the wind kind of blew it over a little bit and it started to lean. So they built the lean on over on this side over here to hold it back up. The reason for the barn quilt is that my wife, Bonnie, decided, well, she'd like to do one. And the reason she picked the the thistle, because we used to have a lot of thistles out in our pasture out here. I just think it's kind of neat. You know, I thought it was a good idea when she wanted to do it. I suppose if we do keep it painted, it'll probably stay there for a long, long time. Who knows? That'll be kind of neat.
I think every quilt tells a story. It tells a little bit about who you are and what you love and what is important to you. My barn quilt I've had up for about 2 years now. It's called Cross and Crown. Our faith is a big part of our lives, and that's another reason why we chose this barn quilt. This farm my father-in-law bought from his dad in 1971, and my husband's grandfather bought it in the 1950s. So it's in our third generation. We're still actively farming, and we want to promote that to our next generation. It's kind of fun to see the different vehicles come by, watching the different license plates that come by. We did have a tour bus last summer that stopped by, and that was a lot of fun.
I think it's a great way to carry on the quilting tradition. Some people are not seamstresses, they do not know how to sew, but doing these barn quilts and painting them, it's something that just about everyone can do. So I think it's neat that we can get quilts out on our barns and preserve that quilting tradition.
I'm Steve Bauer from Caldonia Lumber Company in Caldonia, Minnesota, and we build homes and agricultural buildings. I got about 10 employees, so I switch off, and every now and then I'll pull an employee off and say, okay, we got to go put a barn quilt up. So we have probably put up personally about 10 of them with our big machine. First, somebody's got to come in and purchase 2 pieces of AC plywood and 5 2x4s, 8 foot long. It's just standard 2x4 pine, non-treated. And again, the plywood's just a good 7-ply plywood, so it doesn't delaminate on you. Then they take them to whoever they want and they paint them. I think they look great, and there's so many different designs. If you stand up close and look at some of them, you can't picture the design. You have to back up and take a look at them.
It's a turkey, the Winnebago Tom. Just because of the heritage of turkeys down here, they've netted a lot of turkeys and released them, and you see a lot of turkeys down here. And there's no other animal barn quilts, so I thought I'd do some animal.
Makes me very proud. We've got people coming all over to see these quilts. And it's interesting, the process of the quilts going up. It's fun to see that pride in the history, and you'll see neighbors talking to neighbors about, well, you remember this farm was owned by this individual, and it's brought back a lot of history just within our community.
Come ride with me in the early morning light. Watch the sun coming up and shining bright on the unfamiliar towns along the way. Feel the pale sky and a brand new day. Hold me tighter. Wanna feel you close to me. Speak a little quieter. Hey girl, wanna be my love.
KSMQ congratulates our FFA Student Leader of the Week, Tessa Ries of the Red Wing FFA Chapter.
I grew up on a farm, so I've always been interested in agriculture. And so then when I went to 9th grade, I heard about the FFA and just realized that it would be something that I definitely wanted to invest my time in. My CDE is nursery landscaping, and we identify different plants, learn about the fertilizer that they all need, the different conditions they like, and nursery landscaping in general, so different landscaping plans. In regions, I got 1st place, and at state, our team got 5th place. I love living on the farm just because it's a good atmosphere of us all working together. We're a 3-generation farm, so we all closely work together. So we just have a fun time just being a good team and working towards the goal of sustainability. We have 3 ponies and 2 big horses. The one pony we rescued from an auction, so I trained him to ride, and he's a large pony, so I ride him. And I give horseback riding lessons to my neighbors. I'm a part of the World Food Prize Youth Institute. It's a youth organization that is all youth that is interested in learning more about becoming sustainable and feeding the world as the population grows. The World Food Prize is an award, kind of like the Nobel Peace Prize, given to people who are leaders in agriculture. And at the time when I was put into the nursery landscaping CDE, I had no idea how much I love plants, and now I've just discovered that there's just a whole new world that I am totally interested in and going to have a career in someday. I'm planning on coming to the University of Minnesota for applied plant science degree, and then I'm planning on coming here also as a grad student to study agronomy. I'd like to be an agronomist in the future.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Farm Connections. We hope that you'll explore the world of agriculture yourself and make your own farm connections.